If you are thinking about moving to St. Simons Island, Georgia, you might want to hit pause for just a second. Today, I'm going to share 7 things that you need to be able to handle before moving to St. Simons Island, and you might just decide you can't handle these things. So let's get into it. All right, thing number 1 that you need to be able to handle is the home prices. It's going to come with a pretty hefty price tag. St. Simons Island is one of the most popular destinations in the Golden Isles, not only as a primary residence, but as a secondary residence and for vacationers coming from all over, definitely from the state of Georgia, but even all over the United States. And that's gonna put you at even more expensive than living in, say, the mainland of Brunswick or even Jekyll Island. So, and with it being an island, there's only so much land. Like literally, you can't make more land on St. Simons Island. So that just means there's going to be a premium. Waterfront, marshfront, any kind of view is going to come with that. But as your realtor, I know some of the best neighborhoods on St. Simons Island that are going to be a bit more affordable. So all my information is down in the description box below. At any point, you can pause this video, reach out to me. I would love to help you find those pockets of just paradise that you can actually afford. Okay, thing number 2 is the tourism and crowded peak season. So obviously, if it's a vacation spot, you know there are going to be different seasons that cause way more traffic, higher wait times at restaurants, a little bit higher prices as far as restaurants, you know, all of that, all the local stores and everything can charge a little bit higher because more people are coming, there's more demand. You know, people that are on vacation definitely don't mind spending a little bit more money. So all of those things, something to consider when living on St. Simons Island is that you are going to have to deal with more traffic. And with that traffic, there's only one way on the island and one way off. So we'll get into that a little bit later, what you need to be prepared to handle for with that. But as far as being on the island, like I said, it's a pretty small island. There's not a ton of back roads you can take per se. Like sometimes living in a larger city, you know, the interstate's backed up and you're like, oh, well, I'll just jump off this exit, go the back ways and then dump back on later past the accident. St. Simons Island, that just doesn't happen. Maybe you can cut through a small neighborhood, but for the most part, no, there's gonna be about one way to go. When it's those higher peak season, really it's about the time school starts and then it gets a little bit busier in the fall during like fall breaks and stuff. And then it dies down a little bit around the holidays and winter. And then it picks right back up. So you really just have to expect longer wait times, a little bit more traffic, you know, all that fun stuff that is expected when you live in a place where people like to vacation. Okay, and that brings me to the next thing, number 3, which I just touched on, is the dependence of the FJ Tourist Causeway, which is the only way onto St. Simons and the only way off. So if there is a closure for any reason, there's been times where there's unfortunately a really bad accident and one way has to be closed off, and it takes a while for the public officials to divert that or clear it up. So it either gets super backed up or they have to close the causeway and you're kind of stuck. I've mentioned it in some of my other videos that there have been times where there's a really bad accident or, you know, whatever it may be, and the causeway's closed and I'm trying to go, you know, to the studio to work on the island and physically cannot get there. So that's just something to consider. You know, with there only being one way on, one way off, sometimes things happen and traffic's gonna build up. If you're going over the causeway around 7:45, 8 a.m., it's gonna get backed up. You're gonna have to wait. It moves pretty quickly once you get to the end of the causeway, but just know that sometimes the causeway can close, especially if it's, you know, during a storm and there's the potential for flooding. So you're either stuck on the island or you're stuck off the island. All right, and thing number 4 is a limited job market. It's a very small island. Now, a lot of people that live on the island might work in the mainland of Brunswick, which is just over the causeway. And then a lot of people do work remote or they travel to Savannah or Jacksonville, which are both probably about an hour and 15, maybe an hour and a half, depending on where you live on St. Simons. But that is definitely something to consider if you are still actively working and you're not in the like hospitality industry. There's a lot of small businesses on the island. You know, there's a couple medical offices. So if you are in the medical field, you might have a spot working on the island. or if you own a small business, you know, all of those things, or like I said, hospitality. There's plenty of jobs in that market. Sea Island actually employs a large number of employees, but otherwise you might be traveling over the causeway to work in Brunswick or at one of the larger cities. All right, and the next thing is a limited nightlife. And so if you are looking for nightclubs and a ton of bars, St. Simons might not be the place for you. But if you love art markets, like, you know, where people like handmade crafts and stuff, and farmers markets and live bands at the pier, if you like any of those kind of events, then you will absolutely love living on St. Simons. There is tons of events like that, and there are live bands. We do have a few bars, more like restaurants where you can drink, but there are a few actual bars as well, especially with it being a vacation spot. But most of our activities are outdoor activities like golfing, fishing, you know, like I said, the festivals and markets that are outdoors. A little bit more leisurely of a vibe than raging at a nightclub or a bar, but the opportunities are there. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. But like I said, if you're looking for a nightclub scene, then St. Simons just might not be the spot for you. Okay, and thing number 6 is the potential for hurricanes, tropical storms, and flooding. So obviously this is a big one. Being on the coast of Georgia, it's a no-brainer that that is something you need to consider, and something that goes along with that is being in a flood zone. So that's why it's important to have someone local in your corner to help you understand the flood maps and the potential flooding factors when looking at different neighborhoods and different houses. So if you pause this video, all my information's down in the description box below. Shoot me a text or an email if you're considering moving here, and I would love to help you find the perfect home for you and talk about the potential of flooding and break down what that means for you, because not every single home on St. Simons Island requires flood insurance. Now, is it always a good idea to carry it? Probably, but if you're getting a mortgage, not every, you know, your lender's not gonna require it for every single house. Depends on the flood zone. So that is something I can help walk you through as my client. Aside from flood zones, you also need to consider hurricanes, tropical storms. We talked about the closures of the causeway. If there is a hurricane, if they end up having to evacuate, that's something that you have to consider. Now, I've been in this area for 8 years, and I think there's only been a mandatory evacuation twice during that time and 1 voluntary evacuation. So 3 out of 5, not that bad. It's always up to you. And that's just something you want to consider when looking at houses and the location and all of those factors, of course. Okay, and lastly, thing number 7 is just the slower pace of life. So that is something to consider when moving here. If you love the hustle and the bustle of the city, more power to you. That is not what you're going to find here on St. Simons Island. You are more likely going to find people biking to the beach, slow beach afternoons, people waving to you at the grocery store, smiling, sparking up casual conversation. You know, I mean, we can't go anywhere in town without seeing somebody that we know. So if you're looking for that small town, close community feel, then you're definitely going to find that here on St. Simons Island. But if you love the hustle and bustle of the city, then you might find St. Simons Island a little bit slow. It's a much slower pace of life, but oftentimes that's what most people want when they move to St. Simons Island. So that's something to consider as well. So those are the 7 things that you'll need to handle before making your move to St. Simons Island. So if those didn't scare you off, then reach out to me, call, text, email. I get all of those from you guys every single day, and I love helping you guys make a move to St. Simons Island. Again, my name's Cassie along with Horizon Realty, and you can find all my information down in the description box below. And if you want the full picture of living on St. Simons Island, I put together this video just for you of the pros and cons of living on St. Simons Island. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can keep making beneficial content for you and help you make your move easier.